One battleship, that's all Earth sent. Then Earth's entire armada dropped out of warp. That was enough. The Cathari Compact had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. 600 member species bowed to its laws. Its fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. When the Compact found a new species, it did not ask questions. It sent a fleet, made a demand, and waited for surrender. Humanity was supposed to be the same as every other young species. Small, scared, easy to break. The first contact happened near a dead moon in the Cathari system, on the edge of human space. A compact scout ship, long and curved like a black claw, drifted close to a human mining outpost. The outpost sent a message in every language humans knew. The scout ship did not answer. It scanned the outpost for 6 hours, then turned and left. 3 weeks later, the Compact sent its answer. Not words. A war fleet of 400 ships appeared at the edge of the system. At the front of that fleet sat the flagship of High Marshal Vren Doskal, a warrior who had never lost a war in 300 years of service. His ship alone was larger than every vessel the mining outpost had ever seen. Vren stood on his bridge with his arms folded behind his back. His skin was the color of wet stone, and his eyes were narrow slits that missed nothing. Around him, his officers worked in silence, waiting for his word. "Send the message," Vren said. "Surrender your systems, your resources, and your species to the Compact, or be erased." The message went out. The Compact fleet waited. The answer that came back was strange. It was not from the mining outpost. It came from somewhere deeper in human space, from a system the Compact scouts had marked as empty of anything worth noting. "This is Earth," the message said. "We received your demand. Our answer is no." Vren tilted his head. No fleet had ever said no to the Compact. Not once in 11,000 years. "They are bluffing," said his second officer, a thin creature named Trask, with too many joints in his arms. "They have no fleet that could face us. Our scouts confirmed it. Their largest world has barely begun to build warships." "Then why do they refuse?" Vren asked. No one had an answer. 2 days passed. The Compact fleet held position, scanning human space, growing more confident with every hour that passed without a response. Then, on the edge of their sensors, something appeared. One ship. It came out of warp slowly, without any escort, without any support. Vren's sensor officer read the specifications aloud, and there was doubt in her voice. "One ship, Marshal. Human design, length approximately 4 kilometers. Weapon signatures are larger than anything in our database for a vessel this size. It is alone." Vren almost laughed. "One ship? They send one ship to face 400? Should we destroy it?" Trask asked. Vren raised a hand. "No, let it come closer. I want to see what kind of species sends one ship to die in front of an army." The human vessel continued forward, ignoring every warning beacon the Compact fleet broadcast at it. It was called the ISS Kestrel, though the Compact did not know that yet. Its captain was a woman named Elena Voss, 44 years old, with gray already showing at her temples, and a calm that unsettled everyone who worked under her. On the Kestrel's bridge, her crew watched the enemy fleet fill their screens, ship after ship after ship, more than they could count. "Captain," said her weapons officer, a young man named Cade Ilves, "that's 400 warships. We're one. Should I remind you what 1 against 400 means?" "I know what it means, Lieutenant," Elena said. She did not look away from the screen. "Open a channel, all frequencies. I want them to hear us clearly." The channel opened. On the Compact flagship, Vren's translator crackled to life. "This is Captain Elena Voss of the Earth vessel Kestrel," the human voice said. "High Marshal Vren Doskal, you have asked for our surrender. We are here to answer in person." Vren stepped closer to the view screen, studying the small vessel that dared to speak to him this way. "You are one ship, Captain. I have 400. Do you understand what you are looking at?" "I understand exactly what I am looking at," Elena said. "The question is whether you understand what you are looking at." Something in her voice made Vren pause. Warriors who were about to die from fear did not speak like this. Warriors who were about to die from confidence did. "Explain yourself," Vren said. "Humanity does not send its fleets to negotiate," Elena said. We send one ship, because one ship is a message, not a battle. My ship carries no reinforcements because it needs none. It is here to give you the chance to leave human space peacefully. That chance will not come twice. On the bridge, Trask made a sound that might have been a laugh in his own language. She threatens us. One ship threatens 400. Vren did not laugh. He was an old warrior, and old warriors learned to read more than words. He studied the readings from the Kestrel again. The weapon signatures were still there, unnaturally powerful for its size. The shields were layered in a way his engineers did not recognize, and the woman's voice held no fear at all. Captain Voss, Vren said slowly, why does Earth send one ship instead of a fleet? Because we did not think you deserved a fleet, Elena answered. You brought 400 ships to threaten a mining outpost that had done nothing but ask you questions. We do not believe you came here for war. We believe you came here to bully a species you assumed was weak. I am here to correct that assumption. The bridge went quiet. Even Trask stopped moving. You have 30 seconds to turn your fleet around and leave this system, Elena said. After that, I will stop asking. Vren's hand tightened at his side. No commander of the compact had ever been spoken to this way. Not by a lesser species, not in 11,000 years of conquest. Every instinct told him to open fire immediately and end this insult before it spread through his ranks like a disease. But another part of him, the part that had survived 300 years of war, told him to wait. Something about this human's calm did not fit the pattern of a bluff. 30 seconds is generous of you, Captain, Vren said, but you should know that generosity from a hostage is meaningless. Withdraw your ship, or we will destroy it, and then we will move on to your homeworld. That is your choice to make, Elena said. But I want to be clear about something before you make it. We are not hiding a second fleet somewhere nearby. We are not stalling for time. This conversation is not a trick. I am simply giving you the chance to leave with your fleet intact, because once I give the order, that will no longer be possible. Trask leaned toward Vren and spoke low. She is lying. It must be a bluff. No species sends one ship unless it has nothing else to send, or unless it is mad. Vren considered this. It made sense. It was the only thing that made sense, and yet. 15 seconds, Elena said. Enough of this, Vren snapped. Weapons, target the human vessel. Full spread, end this quickly. Across 400 ships, targeting systems began to lock onto the single human battleship floating in the black, waiting, unmoving, its captain still watching the screen with the same unreadable calm she had shown since the conversation began. On the Kestrel's bridge, Cade Ilvis watched the enemy targeting locks flare to life across his console. Hundreds of them, more than any single ship should ever have to face. Captain, he said, they're locking weapons. All of them. This is it. Elena did not blink. Hold position, Lieutenant. Do not fire until I give the order. Captain, with respect, there are 400 ships about to fire on us. I know, Elena said. That is exactly why we are here. She reached forward and opened a final channel, her voice steady, carrying to every ship in the compact fleet. High Marshal Vren Doskel, you have made your choice. I hope, for the sake of everyone under your command, that you understand what you have just done. Vren's answer came back sharp and final. Fire. 400 ships unleashed everything they had at once. A storm of light and fire aimed at a single human vessel that did not move, did not flee, and did not fire back. And then, in the space of a single breath, space itself seemed to tear open behind the compact fleet. Alarms screamed across every bridge in Vren's Armada. Sensor officers shouted numbers that made no sense. Ships, hundreds of them, then thousands, pouring out of warp behind the compact fleet in perfect formation, filling the black with human steel as far as any sensor could reach. Vren turned from the screen showing the Kestrel, untouched, its shields holding against the barrage, and looked instead at the new readings scrolling across his display. His mouth went dry for the first time in 300 years. Marshal, Trask said, his voice shaking. That is not possible. Our sensors detected nothing. No warp signatures, no approach vectors, nothing. They were never coming, Vren said slowly, understanding dawning on him like a blade sliding into his chest. They were already here. waiting. On the Kestrel, Elena finally allowed herself the smallest exhale, watching the readouts confirm what she had known since the moment she flew alone into this system. "Captain," Cade said, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and relief. "That's the 3rd, 7th, and 12th fleets. That's everything. That's the entire Earth Defense Armada." "I told him," Elena said quietly, "that once I gave the order, this would no longer be a conversation." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the High Marshal. Let him see exactly what he chose to fire on." The channel opened, and on Vren's bridge, the screen filled not with the small human ship he had underestimated, but with an endless wall of warships stretching in every direction. More vessels than his fleet had ever seen assembled in one place. Humanity's answer finally arriving in full. "High Marshal Vren Doskel," Elena said, her voice calm even now. "You were told that one ship was enough to deliver our message. You chose not to listen. Now you will listen to the rest of it." Vren stared at the screen, at the impossible number of ships surrounding his fleet on every side, weapons already charging, and for the first time in 300 years of service to the Compact, the High Marshal felt something he had never expected to feel from a species he had judged too small to matter. Fear. One battleship that's all Earth sent. Then Earth's entire armada dropped out of warp that was enough. Silence filled the bridge of Vren Doskel's flagship. Every officer stared at the screen, at the wall of human warships that had appeared from nowhere, surrounding the compact fleet on all sides. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's systems and the frantic beeping of sensor stations, still trying to process numbers too large to make sense of. Vren's hands were still clenched at his sides. 300 years of command had taught him to control his face in front of his crew, and he used every year of that training now, even as his mind raced through possibilities that all led to the same terrible conclusion. He had ordered his fleet to open fire on a single ship, believing it to be an empty threat, a desperate bluff from a young species that did not understand the size of the Compact. Now that belief lay in pieces around him. "Marshal," Trask said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Orders?" Vren did not answer immediately. He studied the tactical display, watching human ships continue to arrive even now, filling in gaps in their formation, closing every possible route of retreat. He counted battleships larger than his own flagship. He counted carriers releasing fighter wings in numbers that made his throat tighten. He counted, and he stopped counting, because the number no longer mattered. What mattered was that his 400 ships were now surrounded by a force at least 10 times their size, possibly more, and every one of those ships had weapons trained on his fleet. "Status of the Kestrel," Vren said. "Shields at 94%, Marshal," the sensor officer reported. "Our entire opening barrage barely scratched them." Vren closed his eyes for a moment. A single ship, built to withstand a full assault from 400 vessels, had been sent alone into hostile territory, specifically because Earth knew it could survive whatever the Compact threw at it. It was not a bluff, it was a demonstration. And behind that demonstration, an armada large enough to erase his fleet had been waiting the entire time, hidden by technology his own scientists could not explain. On the Kestrel, Elena Voss watched the Compact fleet through her own screens, watched ships that moments ago had been ready to burn her out of the sky, now sitting frozen, surrounded, uncertain. She felt no satisfaction in it. She had hoped, honestly hoped, that the demonstration alone would be enough, that Vren would see reason before the shooting started. He had not. Now the situation had moved beyond words, at least for a little while. "Captain," Cade said from his station. "Orders from Earth Command. Admiral Reyes wants a word." Elena nodded. "Put her through." The screen split, showing a stern-faced woman with close-cropped silver hair, sitting in a command chair aboard the fleet flagship Ares Ascendant, the largest vessel in the entire Armada. "Captain Voss," Admiral Reyes said, "you held position exactly as planned. Good work. The fleet is in formation, and holding. What's the status of the enemy commander?" "He hasn't ordered a second strike," Elena said. "I think he's still processing what just happened." "Good," Reyes said. "Let him process it a little longer. We're not here to start a war, Captain. We're here to end one before it begins. Stand by while I speak with him directly." Elena nodded and stepped back, letting the Admiral take the channel that connected to the compact flagship. On Vren's bridge, a new voice came through, older, colder than Elena's had been, carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "High Marshal Vren Doskel," Admiral Reyes said. "This is Admiral Catalina Reyes, commander of the Earth Defense Armada. You have fired upon a vessel of the human military without provocation, following an unlawful demand for surrender delivered to a civilian outpost, under the terms of first contact protocols recognized by 17 known galactic powers. That action constitutes an act of war." Vren's jaw tightened. "The compact does not recognize protocols it did not write, Admiral. We have conquered 600 species in 11,000 years. Your fleet, however large, changes nothing about that history." "Then let me change something about your future instead," Reyes said. "Every ship in your fleet is currently within range of at least 3 of our vessels. Our weapons are charged and locked. If I give the order, your fleet will be destroyed in less than 4 minutes, and there is nothing you can do to prevent it. I am not telling you this to threaten you, High Marshal. I am telling you this because I want you to make your next decision with a clear understanding of the facts." Vren looked around his bridge, at officers who would not meet his eyes, at Trask, whose confidence from hours earlier had drained completely from his face. "What is it you want, Admiral?" Vren asked, and the words cost him something to say. "I want you to leave human space," Reyes said. "I want you to carry a message back to whoever sits above you in the Compact's chain of command. Tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. Tell them that the mining outpost your scout ship threatened is protected under the same laws that protect every world in our system. And tell them that if the Compact returns to human space with hostile intent again, we will not send one ship next time." "You sent one ship this time," Vren said. "Why?" It was Elena who answered, her voice returning to the channel. "Because you deserved the chance to walk away before this became a war neither of us wanted. I gave you that chance twice. You refused it twice. This is the last time it will be offered." Vren stood in silence for a long moment. Every instinct built over 3 centuries of conquest screamed at him to fight, to prove that the Compact did not bow to threats, no matter how large. But he was not a fool, and he had not survived 300 years of war by refusing to see numbers that could not be argued with. His 400 ships, once the pride of his command, were now surrounded by a force that could erase them without losing a single vessel of their own. "Stand down weapons," Vren said finally, the words heavy in his mouth. "Prepare to withdraw." Trask stared at him. "Marshal, we cannot simply retreat. The Compact will do nothing if we are dead, Trask," Vren snapped. "There is no honor in a battle already lost before it begins. We withdraw. We report what we have seen. And we let wiser minds than mine decide what happens next." The order went out across the fleet. One by one, Compact warships began powering down their weapons, turning slowly to align with the retreat vector Reyes had ordered opened for them. It was a humiliation Vren had never imagined experiencing, retreating before an enemy fleet without firing a single meaningful shot. But it was better than the alternative that had been staring back at him from his own sensor readouts. Before the last of his ships prepared to jump to warp, Vren opened one final channel to the Kestrel, wanting, needing, to understand something before he left. "Captain Voss," he said, "answer me honestly. If I had turned my fleet around when you first asked, would your armada have remained hidden? Would we have left this system never knowing it was here?" Elena considered the question for a moment before answering. "Yes," she said. "We do not want war, High Marshal. We want to be left alone, and we want other species to understand that being left alone is not the same as being weak. You could have walked away with your fleet intact and your pride bruised only a little. Instead, you chose to test us, and now you understand exactly what that test cost." Vren absorbed this, and something shifted in his ancient mind, a small crack in 300 years of certainty about how the galaxy worked. "I will carry your message to the Compact Council," he said. "Whether they listen is beyond my control." "That is all we ask," Reyes said. "Safe travels, High Marshal. I hope we do not meet again under these circumstances." The Compact fleet began to withdraw, ship by ship folding into warp and vanishing from human space, leaving behind only the silence of a battle that had never truly happened. and the quiet hum of an armada that had proven, in a single afternoon, why no one should ever mistake Earth's caution for weakness. On the Kestrel's bridge, Cade Ilves finally let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. "Captain, with respect, I've never been so glad to be wrong about something in my life." Elena allowed herself the smallest smile. "It's not over, Lieutenant. This was only their outer fleet, testing our defenses on the edge of our territory. Somewhere out there, the real leadership of the Compact is going to hear about what happened here today, and they are not going to like the answer." She turned to look out at the vast formation of Earth's armada still holding position around them, thousands of ships that had waited in silence, invisible, for exactly this moment. "Send word to Earth Command," she said. "Tell them the first test is over. The next one will not be this easy." Far beyond the edge of the system, aboard a compact courier ship racing toward the heart of Council space, Vren Doskel sat alone in his quarters, staring at nothing, replaying the moment his fleet had been surrounded by an enemy no scan, no scout, no century of experience had prepared him to face. For the first time in 300 years, the High Marshal understood that the galaxy he thought he knew had just changed, and he was not sure the Compact was ready for what came next. One battleship, that's all Earth sent. Then Earth's entire armada dropped out of warp. That was enough. The Compact Council chamber sat at the heart of a station older than most civilizations, a ring of dark metal orbiting a dying star that the Compact had claimed as its capital 8,000 years ago. Inside, 7 council speakers, one from each of the founding species of the Compact, sat around a curved table lit by pale blue light. At the center of that table, a hologram replayed the sensor logs from the Kafiri system, over and over, showing 400 compact warships surrounded by an Earth armada that had appeared from nothing. High Marshal Vren Doskel stood before them, his armor freshly polished, his posture rigid, though inside he felt none of the calm his body tried to project. He had faced war councils before. He had never faced one that looked at him the way this one did now. "You retreated," said Speaker Mulvash, the eldest of the 7, a creature whose gray skin had gone nearly white with age. 400 ships of the Compact, and you retreated from a single system without firing more than one volley. "I retreated because remaining would have meant the destruction of my entire fleet," Vren said. "The human armada that appeared numbered in the thousands, Speaker. Our scans could not even confirm an exact count before they surrounded us completely. Had I given the order to fight, none of us would have returned to report what we saw." "Convenient," said Speaker Draith, a sharp-voiced representative of the Osun, a species known throughout the Compact for their skill in space warfare. "A fleet appearing from nowhere, undetected by every sensor system we possess, large enough to swallow 400 ships without effort. Do you understand how this sounds, Marshal?" "I understand exactly how it sounds," Vren said. "It sounds impossible. I would not have believed it myself if I had not stood on my own bridge and watched it happen." Silence stretched across the chamber. The hologram continued to replay the moment of the Armada's arrival, ship after ship folding out of warp in perfect formation, filling the screen with more vessels than any single scan had ever recorded outside of compact space itself. "There is precedent for concern here," said Speaker Ilith, a quieter voice from the back of the chamber, representing the Farai, a species that had joined the Compact only 300 years ago and still remembered what it felt like to be conquered rather than conqueror. "Every species we have encountered in 11,000 years followed a pattern. Small fleets, limited technology, a slow build-up toward strength over centuries. This human fleet does not follow that pattern. It appeared complete, coordinated, and unafraid." "You speak as if this species is something to fear," Draith snapped. "They are new. They cannot have more than a handful of star systems under their control. A large fleet does not mean an advanced one." "Then explain the shields," Vren said quietly. The chamber turned to him. "My fleet fired a full opening volley at a single human vessel," he continued. 400 ships, coordinated fire, everything we had. Their shields dropped to 94%. One ship withstood a barrage that would have destroyed most compact capital vessels in seconds, and that ship was sent alone, deliberately, because Earth believed one ship would be enough to survive whatever we brought against it. That is not the behavior of a species building toward strength. That is the behavior of a species that has already arrived." Mulvash leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing. "You believe this fleet represents their full strength?" "I believe," Vren said carefully, "that we do not know their full strength, and that not knowing is more dangerous than any number they could have shown us. A species that hides an armada of that size behind a single unarmed conversation is a species that understands patience, discipline, and the value of restraint. Those are not qualities of the weak speakers. Those are qualities of a power that has learned exactly how much force is necessary and refuses to use more than that." The chamber fell silent again, and this time the silence carried weight. "What do you recommend, Marshal?" Molvash asked finally. Vren had spent the entire journey back from Kafiri preparing his answer, turning it over in his mind 100 times, weighing every possible outcome. "I recommend caution. Send envoys, not warships. Learn what this species wants before assuming what they intend. We have conquered 600 worlds by underestimating nothing and no one who stood in our path. I ask only that we extend that same discipline to Earth, rather than the arrogance that nearly cost us 400 ships in a single afternoon." Draith rose from his seat, anger sharp in his voice. "You ask the Compact to bow before a single demonstration from an unproven species, 11,000 years of conquest, and you suggest we retreat into diplomacy, because one fleet frightened you?" "I suggest," Vren said, his voice hardening, "that 11,000 years of victory has made this council forget what it feels like to face an enemy who might actually win. I felt that today, Speaker Draith. I do not recommend you feel it yourself before you learn to respect it." The words landed heavily across the chamber. Even Draith, red with anger, said nothing further. Molvash raised a hand, calling for quiet. "The council will consider the Marshal's report. In the meantime, all fleet movements toward human space are suspended, pending further intelligence. Marshal Doskel, you are dismissed." Vren bowed and left the chamber, but as the doors closed behind him, he heard Draith's voice rise again behind the metal, already arguing for a harsher response, already refusing to accept what Vren had seen with his own eyes. Light years away, deep within Earth's territory, a very different meeting was taking place. In the war room of Earth Defense Command, buried beneath the mountains of what had once been called Colorado, Admiral Catalina Reyes stood before a wall of screens showing every system on the edge of human space, watching for any sign that the Compact might return. Around the table sat the leadership of Earth's military, along with representatives from the Global Council, the civilian body that still, even now, held final authority over decisions of war and peace. "They retreated," said Counselor Amara Ose, the head of Earth's diplomatic division. "That's good news, isn't it? We avoided war." "We avoided the first battle of a war," Reyes corrected. "There's a difference, Counselor. The Compact has ruled 600 worlds for 11,000 years. A single retreat is not going to convince an empire that size to leave us alone forever. They'll go back, they'll argue among themselves, and eventually they'll come back with either an offer or another test. Then we prepare for both," said General Marcus Webb, sitting at the far end of the table, his arms crossed. The Armada performed exactly as designed. Captain Voss held her position perfectly, and the fleet arrival was flawless. If this is the standard we set for future encounters, I think we've made our point clear. Making our point clear was never the goal, Elena Voss said, standing quietly near the back of the room, having returned from Kafiri only hours earlier to deliver her own report in person. The goal was avoiding war entirely, General. We got lucky today. Vren Doskel was smart enough to retreat instead of doubling down. Not every commander we face will make that same choice. Reyes turned to her. Your assessment, Captain. Elena stepped forward. The Compact will not simply walk away from this. Their entire identity is built around conquest. A species that refuses to bow, backed by a fleet they cannot explain, is going to be seen as either a threat to be crushed or a power to be respected. Which one they choose depends entirely on what happens next. If we show weakness now, they will return with everything they have. If we show restraint without weakness, exactly as we did today, we might convince at least part of their leadership that peace is the smarter choice. And if they don't choose peace? Ose asked quietly. Elena's expression did not change. Then we make sure the entire Armada is always ready to drop out of warp again, exactly when they least expect it. Reyes nodded slowly, looking around the room at faces that carried both relief and quiet dread in equal measure. Earth had survived its first true test against an empire 11,000 years older than humanity itself, but everyone in that room understood, without needing to say it aloud, that the real test was still ahead of them, somewhere in the vast dark between the stars, waiting to see what Earth would do next. Increase readiness across all fleets, Reyes said finally. Continue diplomatic channels through Captain Voss's team, and someone find out everything we can about this compact council before they decide what we're worth to them. The meeting ended, but no one in that room believed, even for a moment, that the story was over. One battleship, that's all Earth sent. Then Earth's entire armada dropped out of warp. That was enough. 3 months passed after the retreat at Kafiri, and for a while, it seemed the silence might hold. No compact ships crossed into human territory. No new demands arrived. Earth Defense Command kept its fleets on alert, watching the border systems, waiting for a message that never came. Then, without warning, Speaker Draith of the Asun did what High Marshal Vren Doskel had feared he would do. He convinced 2 other council speakers that caution was a weakness the compact could not afford to show, and with their support, he assembled a fleet of his own, separate from the council's official forces, built from Asun warships loyal to him personally. 900 vessels, more than double the fleet Vren had commanded at Kafiri, and Draith intended to use them to finish what he believed Vren had failed to start. He did not attack the mining outpost this time. He went further, pushing his fleet deep into human territory, toward a populated colony world called New Meridian, home to nearly 2 million people. His plan was simple and brutal: strike a real target, force Earth's fleet to respond on his terms, and prove to the entire council that the human armada at Kafiri had been a trick, a bluff that could not be repeated twice. Earth Defense Command detected the incoming fleet 6 hours before it reached New Meridian's outer system, and the war room beneath the Colorado Mountains erupted into motion the moment the alert came through. 900 ships, General Webb said, staring at the tactical display, his voice tight. That's more than double what hit Kafiri. And they're not stopping at the edge of the system this time. They're headed straight for the colony. Time to intercept? Reyes asked. If we scramble the 3rd and 7th fleets now, we can reach New Meridian in 4 hours, Webb said. That leaves the colony exposed for 2 hours before we arrive. Their orbital defenses can hold that long, but it will be close. Reyes looked to Elena Voss, who stood at the edge of the room, her face pale but composed. Captain, your read on this? Draith wants a real fight this time, Elena said. He's not testing us anymore. He's trying to prove the last engagement was a fluke, and he's willing to risk civilian lives to do it. We can't afford another slow reveal like Kafiri. If we hold back and wait for a dramatic arrival, people are going to die on that colony before we even get there. Then what do you suggest? Reyes asked. Send everything, now, Elena said. No games this time. No single ship testing the waters. We know what Draith brought. Let's make sure he sees exactly what's coming for him the moment he arrives, so there's no question left to answer. Reyes considered this for only a moment before nodding. Scramble every available fleet. All of them. I want New Meridian skies full of Earth ships before Draith's fleet is close enough to fire a single shot. The order went out, and across a dozen shipyards and staging points throughout human space, the Earth Defense Armada began to move. Thousands of vessels rising from orbit and folding into warp, racing toward New Meridian with a speed that would have seemed impossible only a year earlier. Aboard his flagship, Speaker Draith watched his own fleet approach the colony world with grim satisfaction, confident that the humans would either surrender the world without a fight or scramble together whatever pitiful defense they could manage in the short time available. His sensor officer, a nervous young Asun named Fesic, kept glancing at his readouts with a growing sense of unease that he did not yet have the courage to voice. Report, Draith snapped, noticing the hesitation. Speaker, I am detecting warp signatures, Fesic said carefully. Multiple signatures, converging on this system from several directions. Draith allowed himself a thin smile. The human fleet, finally showing itself honestly instead of hiding. Good, let them come. 900 ships is more than enough to break whatever they send. Speaker, Fesic said, his voice growing tighter. The signatures, There are more than 900. I am reading well over 3,000 distinct warp trails, and the number is still climbing. The smile faded from Draith's face. Recheck your instruments. I have rechecked them twice, Speaker. The number is accurate. Around the bridge, officers began to exchange uneasy glances, remembering the reports from Kafiri that many of them had privately dismissed as exaggeration, as fear dressed up as fact by a marshal too shaken to admit his own failure. Now those same reports were beginning to look like a warning no one had taken seriously enough. Space around Draith's fleet tore open on every side as Earth's Armada arrived in full, not slowly this time, not with the quiet drama of a single vessel testing the waters, but all at once, an overwhelming wave of warships that filled every angle of approach, leaving no gap, no route of retreat, no illusion of an even fight. Impossible, Draith whispered, staring at the tactical display now crowded with more enemy contacts than his sensors could cleanly separate. This cannot be their full strength. No species assembles a fleet this size in 3 months. Speaker, Fesick said quietly, I do not believe this is a fleet they assembled in 3 months. I believe this is a fleet that already existed, and Kafiri was only a fraction of what they were willing to show us. On the bridge of the Ares Ascendant, Admiral Reyes watched the Osun fleet freeze in place, surrounded on every side, and opened a channel directly to Draith's flagship. Speaker Draith, she said, her voice carrying none of the calm patience Elena Voss had shown Vren months earlier. This time, there was steel in it. You brought 900 warships to a colony of 2 million civilians. You did not come here to test us. You came here to hurt us. That is a mistake High Marshal Vren Doskal did not make, and it is a mistake you are about to regret making. Draith straightened, trying to salvage what dignity remained to him. The compact does not answer to threats from lesser species, Admiral. We have conquered. 600 worlds, yes, we've heard, Reyes cut in. 11,000 years of conquest. I am not interested in your history, Speaker. I am interested in the fact that you brought a war fleet within striking distance of a civilian colony, and I want you to understand, very clearly, that this decision has already cost you everything. On Reyes's order, a portion of the Earth fleet opened fire, not on Draith's flagship, but on the outer ring of his formation, precise and devastating, destroying nearly 200 Osun vessels in less than 90 seconds, while the rest of the fleet held position, weapons still trained on every remaining ship. Panic spread through Draith's fleet as ship after ship went dark on his tactical display, officers screaming over the comm channels for orders that Draith, frozen at the center of his own bridge, could not seem to give. Speaker, Reyes said, her voice cutting through the chaos. That was 200 ships in 90 seconds, using a fraction of the fleet currently surrounding you. I have not yet ordered a full engagement. I am giving you the chance High Marshal Doskal was given at Kafiri, and I suggest you consider it more carefully than he did, because I will not offer it a third time to anyone. Draith's hands trembled at his sides, staring at the wreckage scattered across his sensor display, understanding at last that the reports from Kafiri had not been exaggeration or fear. They had been, if anything, an understatement. Stand down, he said finally, the words barely audible. All ships, stand down weapons. We are withdrawing. The remaining 700 ships of his fleet began powering down, turning toward the retreat vector Reyes's fleet had opened for them, a humiliation made sharper by the fact that this time, unlike Vren's retreat, everyone throughout the compact would soon learn exactly how badly it had gone. As Draith's shattered fleet limped away from New Meridian, Elena Voss stood beside Admiral Reyes on the Ares Ascendant's bridge, watching the enemy ships vanish into warp one by one. He won't forget this, Elena said quietly. And neither will the rest of the council. Good, Reyes said. I don't want them to forget it. I want every speaker in that council chamber to understand exactly what happens the next time someone brings a war fleet into our territory. Vren Doskal learned a lesson at Kafiri and had the wisdom to walk away. Draith needed a harder lesson, and now he has one. The question is whether the rest of the compact learns from his mistake, or whether we have to teach it to them one fleet at a time. Elena looked out at the vast formation of Earth ships still holding position around New Meridian, thousands of vessels standing guard over 2 million people who would never know how close they had come to disaster, or how completely that disaster had been prevented. Either way, she said, I think the galaxy just learned that Earth's patience has a limit, and that limit is a lot closer than anyone in the compact expected. One battleship, that's all Earth sent. Then Earth's entire armada dropped out of warp. That was enough. News of Draith's defeat reached the compact council chamber, before Draith himself did, carried by frightened survivors of his shattered fleet, who had fled ahead of their disgraced commander, unwilling to share in whatever punishment awaited him. By the time Draith finally stood before the council, stripped of the confidence that had carried him into New Meridian's system 3 weeks earlier, the 7 speakers already knew the shape of what had happened, even if they did not yet understand how. 200 ships, Speaker Molvash said, his voice flat and cold as he studied the reports laid out before him. Destroyed in under 2 minutes, by your own account, using only a portion of the enemy fleet present. Explain to this council how that is possible, Speaker Draith. Draith, once so certain of his own judgment, now stood with his head bowed, his voice quieter than anyone in the chamber had ever heard it. Their weapons are beyond anything in our arsenal. Their coordination across thousands of vessels was flawless. I do not believe we have ever faced a fleet of this caliber, not even in the earliest wars that founded this compact. And yet you assured this council that Marshal Doskel's report from Kafiri was exaggeration, said Speaker Ilith, the Farai representative who had urged caution from the very first meeting. You assured us that a single retreat did not represent the true strength of this species. Now we have 2 engagements, and 2 humiliations, and I would remind this council that both of them ended the same way, not because Earth was too weak to fight, but because Earth chose restraint, even when it held every advantage. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, broken finally by Molvash, who turned his ancient eyes toward the empty seat where High Marshal Vren Doskel usually stood when summoned to report. Where is the Marshal? Molvash asked. I asked him to remain outside, Speaker, said an aide near the chamber doors. I believe the council might wish to hear directly from someone who predicted this outcome months ago. Molvash considered this for a long moment before nodding. Bring him in. Vren entered the chamber quietly, his posture as rigid and disciplined as it had been the first time he stood before this same council, though something in his expression had changed in the months since Kafiri, a weariness that had not been there before. You warned this council, Molvash said, that underestimating Earth would carry a cost. Speaker Draith did not heed that warning. Now the compact has lost 1,100 ships combined across 2 engagements, along with something far more difficult to replace, our confidence. I take no satisfaction in being right, Speaker, Vren said. I would have preferred to be wrong, and for the compact to have simply walked away from a species that made clear, from the very first conversation, that it wanted only to be left alone. Draith's head lifted at this. You believe Earth truly does not want conquest? After showing us a fleet of that size, hidden behind a single ship, you believe their intentions are peaceful? I believe, Vren said carefully, that a species capable of hiding an armada that size, and choosing not to use it except in direct response to aggression, is a species that understands restraint better than we have credited them for. Twice now, speakers, Earth has held overwhelming force in its hands. Twice, they chose to let their enemies retreat, rather than destroy them completely. That is not the behavior of a conqueror. That is the behavior of a power that wants peace, but will not accept being tested for it. Molvash leaned back in his seat, studying the hologram still replaying scattered images from New Meridian, human ships holding position around a colony world they had successfully defended, without needing to fire more than a fraction of their strength. Then I put a question before this council, Molvash said, and I ask each speaker to consider it honestly, rather than through the pride that has already cost us so dearly. Do we continue to test a species that has twice shown us both its strength and its restraint, risking further losses each time we misjudge them? Or do we, for the first time in the history of this compact, choose diplomacy before conquest, and learn what kind of neighbor Earth might become if we simply stop trying to make them an enemy? The chamber was silent for a long while. Even Draith, humbled by his own defeat, said nothing to argue against the question. It was Speaker Ilith who finally spoke. I move that the compact send a formal envoy to Earth, not a fleet, not a demand, but a genuine offer of dialogue between equals. I believe, after what we have seen, that anything less would be not just arrogant, but foolish. One by one, the other speakers voted in agreement, until only Draith remained silent, staring at the table before him, understanding at last the shape of the lesson he had been taught. Months later on Earth, in a quiet conference room overlooking the reconstructed skyline of a city that had rebuilt itself many times over the centuries, Elena Voss sat across the table from a compact envoy for the first time, a calm and careful diplomat named Speaker Eilith, sent personally by the council to begin the conversation that Draith's arrogance had nearly destroyed before it could start. Your council took its time deciding to talk instead of fight, Elena said, though there was no real bitterness in her voice, only tired relief. 11,000 years of conquest is a difficult habit to break, Captain, Eilith said. It took the near destruction of 2 fleets to convince the Council that Earth was not simply another world to be added to our count. I hope you understand that not every speaker agreed easily. I understand, Elena said. I only hope the ones who did agree stay in power long enough to make it matter. Eilith allowed something close to a smile. So do I, Captain. So do I. Outside the window, high above the city, a single Earth warship passed silently across the evening sky, a quiet reminder of everything that stood ready and waiting, unseen, whenever it might be needed again. Elena watched it go, thinking back to the moment she had sat alone on the bridge of the Kestrel, facing 400 enemy ships with nothing but her orders, and her faith in a fleet she trusted to arrive exactly when it was needed. It had been enough then. It had been enough at New Meridian, and as long as Earth remembered the lesson written into both of those battles, that true strength was not measured by how often you used it, but by how rarely you needed to. She believed it would remain enough for whatever the galaxy still had waiting beyond the stars. The meeting between Earth and the Compact continued long into the evening, the first real conversation between 2 very different powers who had almost become enemies before either side understood the other. It was not the end of the story between them, not by any measure. But it was, finally, a beginning worth having, built not on conquest or fear, but on the simple, hard-earned respect of one species that had learned, the difficult way, that Earth's silence should never be mistaken for weakness, and that when the moment finally came, one battleship really had been all it took to prove it.